Hey guys, it's Mrs. Wallace. I just wanted to do a short video that just reiterated some of the main points that we went over during class today. This is just in case you're interested in just reviewing some of the main points, and some of you suggested maybe a PowerPoint might help you break down some of the information. One of the things that we're really looking at is why is it that we get to the Cold War? Why did the Grand Alliance break down? We have these three countries that are kind of tied together against the common enemy of the Nazis. Why is it that things break down? How and when along the way does that happen? And a couple of things to note. In 1941, we do have the invasion of Soviet Union by Nazi Germany, and it's at that point where the Soviet Union becomes part of the alliance. The United States at that point will start to send material to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program, and ultimately when the United States becomes in the war, the United States is attacked by Japan and declares war on Japan. Germany will declare war on the United States. Then we see, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union kind of, work together to try to, go against the Nazis. When we think of, early in the war, it's really Stalin's Russia that's really doing most of the fighting. Most of the soldiers, most of the fighting, and most of the losses are going to happen throughout 1942, and that's going to be happening in 1941, 1942. So it is some time before the United States really starts to participate, not necessarily in the economic production. That's something the United States is really offering and contributing a great deal to. It is kind of, gearing up all of the allies, and that's its largest contribution. It's producing, but not yet sending a lot of soldiers. There's a great deal of suspicion, of course, and we know that there's these conferences that occur in Tehran, Yalta, and Potsdam. Just in these few slides, we'll look at Tehran and Yalta, kind of what we looked at in class. Okay, some of the big disagreements, of course, are about what happens after the war with some of the territory. Germany, because the government will collapse, will be taken over. Poland, which becomes either part of it annexed by the Soviet Union or becomes a satellite state. So there's issues regarding what happens to Poland and also Eastern Europe. There's also issues related to nuclear weapons, and so we'll kind of look at some of the big takeaways. Okay, and this should echo a lot of what you already have in your notes. It's just a way to kind of see some of the pieces as they flow. If this is helpful, again, it's just an option. Just to remind you, we're looking at several steps that really lead to the origins of the Cold War, maybe between 1945 and 1949. There's like a series of events that kind of one onto the other create kind of the meltdown of the Great Alliance. When we look at the Tenet Conference, this is the first time that Stalin and FDR are meeting, and this becomes a significant conference with the intent of trying to look at the post-war world and also look at how to win the war. Those are really the two hot topics. By 1943, the Soviet Union has been successful in pushing Germany back, and they're kind of moving toward what will become, the entire Eastern Front, Red Army moving toward Germany. So the Allies can be fairly confident in 1943. At the same time, there's still a long way to go, and Stalin's losses are still really excessive. We have a few things that are notable at this conference. We do see Roosevelt and Stalin, at least from Roosevelt's perspective. He says and writes at the end of the conference that he felt like he was able to get along with, quote unquote, Uncle Joe. There is, however, very, very clear distinctions, in what Stalin wants and what Churchill and FDR want. And, without a doubt, we can argue that, FDR is going to appease Stalin a little bit, except that Stalin is going to take some territory, largely territory the Red Army's already standing on by 1943, and ultimately that's kind of almost like an appeasement type of tactic. These are the three men, famous picture from Tehran. Churchill to me always looks like he's like sitting in class. It's kind of like, so in any case, a couple of the things that we know are the big debates, and you guys talked about this in class today. We know that the creation of a second front is something that Stalin really wants. He's really looking for there to be some pressure in Western Europe. Really he wants an invasion in France that's going to go toward, Berlin, and ultimately will take some of the pressure off of the Red Army. And he finds it very frustrating that the Americans and Great Britain are not able to do that any earlier. The Americans are very afraid of that particular type of invasion, and when it is planned, it's planned a year in advance, and ultimately, kind of set for May of 1944, but it is planned well in advance with a great deal of, interplay from many countries. It's not only, it's really an allied invasion where there's going to be a variety of different countries participating, taking different beaches all throughout a certain area in France, and the D-Day invasion ultimately does enable the Allies on the ground. But that 1943 debate in Tehran is really kind of focused on the creation of the Second Front and Stalin's issue with the other Allies not doing that. And he will have advantages when it comes time for the post-war world, because there wasn't a second front early on, and a great deal of the territory in Eastern Europe is going to be annexed by Stalin before the other Allies get to Germany. The other issue, of course, is the unconditional surrender. What will happen to Germany, and there's distinctions here. Arguably, the United States and the UK would like to see a much more prosperous Germany, whereas perhaps Stalin would like to see really a destroyed Germany. This becomes a goal for an unconditional surrender, right? This is essentially the government of Germany will be no longer. The Tehran Conference also has debates about Poland. This is a huge, discussion point. Not a lot is decided at Tehran formally. That happens more at Yalta, but the idea is very much the same, and we see some elements of appeasement here. There is, the demand for territory from Poland. Stalin is really looking to keep the territory that was acquired in 1939, and this is going to be the area of not only part of Poland, but also, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Into 1940, Stalin had taken some of that territory, also certain areas of Finland. So early on, before the meeting in Tehran, Stalin had annexed territory that he's keeping. There's not too much opportunity for the other allies to push back on that, but he does agree that Poland will be compensated with land from Germany. That becomes incredibly complicated and uproots many people, horrifically. The Eastern European, also the Baltic states, Finland, and of course this is all in violation of the Atlantic Charter. The other issue is whether or not there will be a second front in Asia. Stalin does refuse in 1943 not to go to war with Japan and help the United States until the war with Germany is won. And then there is the discussion of the United Nations. So it becomes like something discussed in principle, but to have an international organization. And of course, like the League of Nations is on everybody's mind. The League of Nations is something that maybe had failed after World War I. So the idea is to create a collective security organization where countries of the world will be able to have a say, but to organize it in such a way that they'll actually have some teeth. And that's where we see the development at Yalta, really, of the Security Council. And so the positive outcomes, the agreement on the UN, and the weak post-war Germany, that's something that's really agreed upon. Some of the other things are just really talking points. So we'll talk some more about Yalta in class tomorrow, but, how did the Tehran Conference affect superpower relations? This actually creates a little bit of confidence for FDR. He kind of comes bouncing home after the Tehran Conference, largely because there is a sense that he feels like he can, work with Stalin. How much that would have continued, which is kind of unknown, but Churchill and Stalin actually have a meeting in 1944 in Moscow, and this meeting will also suggest that Churchill and Stalin kind of see the world through a similar lens, and that they also kind of agree with the idea of spheres of influence, and they kind of carve out on a piece of paper a whole bunch of countries and where there will be a dominant sphere of influence. So in any case, I hope that's helpful. Have a good rest of the night.